in our consciousness and what is going on with us in this world, and that we have not been forgotten. They remember us, and they're taking care of us. These are our ancestors. These are the old ones that are still connected to us now. They extend through all cultures and all levels of life, even down in German families and American families, and from South Africa or anywhere else. These are our ancestors doing something for us so that we can make a change. And in making this change, we do something for them. We bring them back. We'll explain this later. Now, with that background, with that knowledge and that information, we're going to begin to tell you the living side of all of this, the story that has unfolded around the world over the last, really, probably 65 years or so. And so, it took time. I mean, as Atlantis sank and all the different factors began to happen, the pyramids started to be built continuously all around the world, especially after the first 6,000 years. It took that long. In the precession of the equinoxes, there was a point in there that we had to reach before the pyramids and everything could really start to be built on a massive scale, because humanity was not on a level that they could do those kinds of things. But eventually, after 6,000 years, we were ready. And so these pyramids started to be built here and there in China and Japan and in the Yucatan and Guatemala and South America, all over the world, in Russia. And as this was going on, each time one of these was built, the electronic grid around the Earth would take a little bit more geometrical form and become a little more closer to what would be necessary for us to be able to connect to as a living thing. Progress all the way up until, say, about 65 years ago, directly after World War II. And then things began to happen on another level. We had other people began to become involved in what we were doing. Only 1 year after the World War II was over with, in 1946, the summer of 1946, spaceships appeared all over Europe, and every single military base there, almost without exception. The following year, in June of 1947, spaceships appeared all over the military bases all over the United States. How do I know this? Because there's historical documents that most people haven't seen that proves that this is true. And this opened another doorway, because now we began to get extraterrestrials involved in this work of this grid, besides just the Ascended Masters and humanity. By a little bit later in that, by the 1960s, we began to see crop circles in England. We began to see crop circles that were not only in wheat and different kinds of crops, but we began to see ice circles where they were formed in ice. And circles that were huge, and obviously nobody had stepped on the ground at all. They were perfectly embedded in the ice, and we found thousands of these now. Then we found crop circles that were with trees in Canada, where the trees were formed over. No human being could have done this either. And though we do know through Colin Andrews that about 80% of the crop circles were man-made, the other 20% are not human, at least human as we know it, based crop circles. This was another level of communication that began to take place around the world. It was important communication, but to this day we haven't really understood what they were saying. As we got closer up into about the 1980s, a phenomenon began to take place, and there was probably many of you watching this may remember this. From about 1983, 4, all the way up, and maybe even as early as 1980 or so, all the way up to about 1991, 1992, there were people all over the world, and I mean everywhere, that were sitting in meditation. They were mostly people that did do meditation. They were able to understand subtle energies. And in their meditations, they were told that they had to take a crystal to some pyramid, some temple, somewhere in the world, and to program it in a certain kind of way and to place it there. We estimate at least 150,000 to 150,000 people were involved in this. And every time someone went to a certain temple, like Chichen Itza in Mexico, and placed a little crystal in a certain place where they were told to do, this affected the energy of the geomancy of that space just a tiny bit, which would then correct the geometries that were above the earth. After probably a number of crystals that approached nearly 1 million crystals, this had a dramatic effect on the unity grid above the Earth. But by 1989, and this was documented from the people that I work with, at any rate, by 1989, the unity grid around the world was geometrically proper, meaning it was an icosahedron, pentagonal dodecahedron relationship. And energy was moving through it and flowing through it for the first time. But it still was not perfect. There were still problems involved in this, and more corrections needed to be made. By the mid-90s, there was a small group of people. This number of people was probably less than 100 people. It was probably closer to 70 or 80 that were experts on subtle energies. And I was one of those. But only one. There were many, many, many other people that were just as important doing what they were doing on those levels. And we were directed to go to very specific pyramids and to make very specific changes, and not changes in the grid or by changing the energies of the pyramids or the temples, but rather the indigenous people that lived in those areas had done things in their lifetime that had caused a distortion in the energetic body of the earth. We had to go into the Anasazi at one point and make corrections in the Four Corners area where we are now because of what they did over the years that they were involved. We then were involved with the Maya and in Guatemala and Belize and in that area down in there, doing ceremony after ceremony after ceremony to solve the problems of what they did a long time ago. We then went into Peru with the Inca, and each time, by the way, we were invited to these places. We didn't just show up and say, hey, we want to do something here. Each time, the people of that area would ask us to come there, and we would always accept it, and they knew exactly what we were doing and why we were doing it. The Incas appeared while we were in Mexico and said that the shamans wanted us in Peru. When they got there, though, they didn't just accept us. We had to show by our actions and our energies signs that would come from within Mother Earth to prove that we were the people. Each time this was always the case. It didn't matter what we said, it was what Mother Earth said in our behalf. And we passed every one of these tests and began to correct all these things. We went into New Zealand, and there is a very good video that will be coming out very soon to show you what these kinds of things look like when they're in real life taking place. And then I wrote a book called The Serpent of Light. And this book described the interaction of myself and other people I work with approximately a little less than 1,000 indigenous tribes in North and South America. This was about the same energy times that the Mayans are talking about with the precession of the equinoxes of the last 13,000 years and the last 26,000 years. The Serpent of Light talks about the kundalini of the earth moving from the western mountains of Tibet to the northern mountains of Chile. This was an extraordinary historical event that almost nobody on Earth knew that was taking place, but it was huge, it was massive. And the energy comes from the center of the earth and finds a place. It comes out very much like a snake. That's why it was called the Serpent of Light. And first it moves all over the world, moving from every single area of the earth. And then it finds a place and it coils down inside the earth, and it stays there for the next 13,000 years. And this energy is the Kundalini.